Everyone, and thanks for being with me. I'm going to start today on a matter which I was slightly concerned about because the post I received was from someone whom I respect, and about, I don't know, 15, 20 years ago, I guess, I helped support in terms of relationships he had and a lot of other stuff. And found that she was a woman, she's a woman, and I admired her for her challenges and her talents and abilities and a whole host of other things. But she's since moved overseas to a nameless country, and she clearly is a Trump supporter because she sent me a post on Facebook stating that she doesn't understand why I posted an anti-Trump meme of some description. Plus the fact she could always have a look at my stuff that I put on Facebook, which is known in my YouTube videos, so she could have responded to some of those. But in this particular instance, it was in relation to this particular meme I put out about Trump. And I was surprised by her response because she asserted that because I had a different opinion to hers and I was a therapist, that perhaps I would see things the same way that she did. And I find that incredulous. It was like, because, I spent most of all of my career really, just listening to people, asking questions, being inquisitory, I guess, inquiring about what it is they were doing with their lives and how that was for them, and looking for solutions to the problems that they were facing. So that's how I conducted my life. Now, I guess to some extent that's how people knew me. But it almost seems to me like I can't have an opinion that is separate from that version that these people had of me while I was working as a therapist. It's like I didn't have an outside life. Later on, I had a political party, for Christ's sake, that worked around child protection issues. And I guess as long as I stuck to those sorts of things, then I wouldn't be contravening anybody's specific values or beliefs. But I was surprised when I did, because one of the things that she did say, which startled me, was, why am I so concerned about what's happening in the United States, given that I'm not from the United States? And it's not the first time I've had that response. I've had that. Lots of people have said that to me. What are you doing? You're an Australian. Why do you care? Well, the same question could be asked as, why do I care about what's happening in Gaza? Why do I care that so many children and women have been killed? Why has there been so much collateral damage? Why is it that we as a government haven't found a way to stand up against the genocide that is Gaza? Why is it that I get concerned when I see the camps, the refugee camps in Sudan, and get concerned about the conflict there, a conflict that we very rarely talk about in mainstream media? Why do I get concerned about some of the things that are happening in Africa, and an Ebola breakout and a measles breakout in Texas? Why am I concerned? Well, because I'm a humanist, because I care about all of those things that are happening elsewhere. Because, Jesus, they're people. Why should we be only concerned about what's happening in our own community or with our own family? There are so many people I've met over the years whose world consists just of this one place in which they live. And outside of that, it's like there's nothing else. And when we talk about, we could have political bubbles, we can have communal bubbles and family bubbles and these other forms of bubbles that and business bubbles that don't take us outside of those restricted constraints that we put upon ourselves because we're not inquiring about what happens elsewhere. We don't want to see what is happening elsewhere. I know of someone I spoke to recently who told me that she hasn't watched free-to-air news. In fact, she doesn't watch any news at all and hasn't done so for 13 years. And I couldn't help but think, well, why don't we want to look outside and see what's happening? And I think some people might choose to do that because it's too much of a conflict. They see a lot of sadness and a lot of harm. I was watching actually the other day, and I don't often watch free-to-air news. I tend to watch the ABC, but I was watching this because I was watching the cricket actually, and it was on Channel 7, and the Channel 7 news came on, and I hadn't realised to switch the cricket to another station. But anyway, I was watching the Channel 7 news, and it was nothing but mayhem. It was local news. It was nothing but about car crashes, a couple of murders, houses being put on fire. It was just about, like, if you just looked at that news service alone and thought this is the sum total of the state in which you're living, it's a mess. You know, I know it's not the true story. And I know that there are people living their lives quite freely and well and being productive and a whole host of other things. It isn't all about mayhem. I understand that. But that's certainly the impression one would get if you looked at the news. So I can understand why people might want to turn off from that. But it doesn't mean that we can't seek information from elsewhere, particularly from mainstream media to some extent, even though there's some elements of that which I find a bit dicey to say the least because they just don't confront the real issues. But the question came back to, why is it that that I'm interested? Like, is Australia impacted by Trump? Well, as of today, Australia is heavily impacted by Trump. There's two areas I want to talk about in which we are impacted. And certainly now that a tariff has been imposed on steel and aluminium here in Australia. And the issue for us is, why us? Like, it's like this child, thinking, what have we done that's wrong? And the teacher is spanking us and I haven't done anything wrong, which is sad because this is who Trump is a bully. But why is he bullying us? Because we have a trade surplus with the United States. So, in other words, we import more into this country than we export to them. So why us? And there's a couple of reasons for that. And I'll go through, I don't know if I've put, yes, it is here. I'll bring this up and we will have a look at it. So Trump has levied new tariffs. We know this. So Trump has levied new tariffs on Canada and Mexico, 25%, all that sort of stuff. He imposed an additional tariff of 10% on all Chinese goods, some of which, such as electric cars, already attracted a tariff. The president's delayed imposing the new charges on Canada and Mexico pending negotiations. So he's going to do it. He chose not to do it. He has this thing around tariffs. Tariffs are going to solve all problems for him. And he states that, and this is the part I wanted to read, Trump said the tariffs had three targets. Observe this. Number one is the people that have poured into our country so horrible and so much. Number two are the drugs, fentanyl and everything else that have come into the country. I just want to think of this in relation to Australia, where none of this is relevant, I hasten to add. And number three, the massive subsidies we're giving to Canada and Mexico over deficits. So this is in relation to those countries, but none of it. So how do tariffs actually work? What is their effect on the world trade? Will Australia be caught in the crossfire? So this was written, I think, a day before this stuff came out. So, and then they had an update to it, which they said on February the 9th, this is today, about the 9th in the US, President Trump said he would impose 25% tariffs on all steel and aluminium imports into the US, and he flagged reciprocal tariffs matching other countries' duties on US imports. If they are charging us 130% and we're charging them nothing, it's not going to stay that way, he told reporters aboard Air Force One, and introduced tariffs of 25% on steel and 10% on aluminium. Back then, Australia secured an exemption. So we did, under Turnbull, we did seek an exemption, and we were given it. The question is, will we be given it this time? I don't think so. And even though Albanese's got a meeting scheduled for Trump, who knows when that will be, when he'll be able to fit us into his tight schedule between eating McDonald's and Diet Coke and playing golf, who knows? But apparently he will schedule so. But the important thing to understand about all of this also, I think, is that Trump sees tariffs as being a way to raise money to pay for the tax cuts that he'll be paying to the wealthy. So the way it works will be money comes into the country, the government collects that as a tax, which it is, the tariff, and that money is then put into the coffers, and eventually that would accumulate to the point whereby they'll say, well, we've got enough money now to pay for the $1 trillion tax cuts that we want for the top 10% for all our mates. That's what it'll be for. Because Trump is not interested one iota. He is not interested at all in doing anything for the American people. So the fact that the American people will miss out on this, that United States citizens will find that their prices will go up, is inconsequential to him. He just does not care. The other area that should concern us, the other point I really want to make too, is that Trump cutting down on US aid impacts Australia. And there is this interesting article in the Saturday paper that I just wanted to bring up that the kind of talks about this as well. So the Trump administration has also ordered a freeze on government grant payments, including from the National Institute of Health, which is the single biggest public funder of biomedics research in the world. In 2024 alone, the NIH approved more than $22 million of new grants for medical research in Australia to institutions including the University of Sydney, University of Melbourne, University of Queensland, and the Walter and Eliza Hall Institute. So the point here is that this funding that is cut, so Trump affects us. The bastard impacts our lives because it impacts the research that is done at universities to help to improve our lives. There are reports of researchers in the US being unable to access their paychecks. Staff at the National Institute of Health, including researchers, are also now subject to a travel ban, which will stop them attending research conferences or meetings with research collaborators. What a bastard. This order also includes the US National Science Foundation, which has previously funded research in Australia in a range of fields, including astronomy. A list of flagged keywords for current NSF grant proposals includes BIPEC, ethnicity, of course, female, Indigenous community, socioeconomic and inclusion, according to reports. The grant freeze has since been temporarily rescinded following a legal challenge from the National Council of Not-Profits. But the point is that the DEI stuff is even affecting us because it's in those areas in which research may be made or hirings may be made of DEI people. So equity and inclusion is out the door. Let's do away with diversity altogether because Trump simply says so in areas which impact us because we depend on that funding for collaboration with some of the institutes in Australia that provide that research. That is what we do. So it is important for us to understand that what Trump does, even in relation to the cutting of funding, affects us, not just tariffs. And it comes back to this point, I guess. Should I be concerned about what happens in the United States? Well, yes, I should, because there are going to be a lot of people that will suffer as a result of what he's doing, and that concerns me. There are clearly a lot of people who are stricken by poverty, who will eventually find that Medicare, Medicaid will be cut, and that the services that people require to be able to provide for themselves will diminish. Social Security will be ripped out of people's control. Elon Musk will have access to all the data, which he'll probably on-sell to Russia or some other country, Iran, whatever. The corruption which will fester in the United States will eventually at some point affect us here, just like the tariffs. Like people were saying, the tariffs aren't going to affect us because we're inconsequential, we trade too little, and there's a surplus with the US, so, why is it going to matter? Because at the end of the day, Trump doesn't give a shit about how this is going to affect anybody. Just the money that's rolling into the coffers and the idea that that money will be able to pay for the top 10%, their tax cuts. That's it. Not about the pain it will cause anybody, not the fact that people may even die from some of the crazy decisions that he's made, particularly with regard to USA aid. So, US aid, I should say. So, there's a lot happening. And yes, it does affect us. The moron in chief plays a part in our lives. This is what really pisses me off. Whether we like it or not, and I don't like it, he's playing a part in our lives, in the well-being of our country, by imposing tariffs on goods that is unnecessary to impose tariffs on so that he could pay for tax cuts. That's my message. And I think it is incredibly wrong. So I just want to finish with this bit. So here it says, but who actually pays for tariffs? Importers either absorb those costs or they pass it on to the American consumer. The last time Trump put tariffs on goods from China, most, if not all, of those costs were passed on to US consumers, according to the New York Times. In January, Capital Economics predicted that Trump's latest tariff threats would, if implemented in full, trigger a rebound in consumer price inflation later this year. And that's exactly what will happen, because he doesn't care about you, about them, about anybody else for that matter. So if you like anything or disagree with anything that I've said, please let me know, as people do. In the meantime, take care, look after yourselves, and more importantly, be safe.